Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing a 5 mini book reviews. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot with these books because they're the books I've read recently and I just did my wrap up, but for the sake of consistency, I'm going to review them again. The first one is All the Gallant Men by Dawn Stratton. As I have said before, this is an autobiography or a memoir of the attack on Pearl Harbor by a USS Arizona survivor, one of the remaining 5. It starts with his childhood and goes through all of that, and then through the attack on Pearl Harbor and all the way through his reenlistment in 1944 and Okinawa. However, the focus in this book is the attack on Pearl Harbor and his survival of it, which is intense to say the least. I adored this book. It made it to my best books of 2017 list. I also got it signed, which is amazing. It's very simply written. You can tell the time he was written, and I think a lot of that generation didn't necessarily get the college education that a lot of us did, but he's very intelligent and you can tell by how he writes. It's very simply written, like I said, but there's a lot there. It's a story in the truest sense of the word. He doesn't skimp on the details. He doesn't hide behind what he should have felt or what the society wanted him to feel even after the war was over, when people were starting to heal a little bit more. He doesn't skimp on any of that, and I think that's really important. He also tells you in the book that he wrote it because we cannot forget it. Forgetting it is a horrible idea and it will cause us to repeat the incident, which is one of the main reasons I read the book. I firmly believe that those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. And finally being able to read a book about Pearl Harbor from the point of view of a survivor on one of the worst hit ships there was heartbreaking and amazing at the same time. He does have statistics in the book about how many men died and how many ships were hit, etc., etc., but then he personalizes it by bringing in stories of his shipmates or the Arizona's band, all that kind of stuff, which I really loved because it did bring it home much more strongly. So I gave that one a 5 out of 5. Next one is Incan Bone by Rachel Caine. This is the first in a 4-book series. It's a YA fantasy with sort of a dystopian feel. The Great Library was created after the Great Library in Alexandria burned, ancient Egypt kind of era, and then it gets to about present day, except that the Great Library has become this all-knowing, all-seeing, basically, entity that controls the distribution of knowledge. We follow these several teenagers, they're about 16, 17, as they go through the trials and tribulations required to become an employee of the library. There are wars, there's politics, there's problems that these kids don't know and that they don't recognize, and they have to figure out who to trust and why and what exactly they're supposed to be doing and how to change the library to better benefit humanity in the future, which the library, by the way, does not want. Again, I loved this book as well. It did feel a little bit more telling and not showing necessarily. At some points there wasn't a lot of conversation. It felt very block paragraphed off, if that makes sense. I know that's not a verb, but we're going with it. However, even despite that, I gave this book a 4 or 5 out of stars because the plot was just really good and it made you really think. It brought in people like Thomas Paine and Johann Gutenberg and the different history. America is a territory that's basically been forgotten about. It's violent and overwhelming. It's not at all what we think of as the States today, which I thought was very interesting. It rewrote history completely, but still maintained enough of its familiarity for us to be able to relate to the characters and relate to the plot as it was going on. Next one is Crucible of Gold by Naomi Novik. This one is the 7th in her Temeraire series about dragons and their flyers in specifically Great Britain, but there are other countries, during the early 1800s, the Napoleonic Wars to be specific. In the first book, which is the plot I will tell you because the rest of them just build from there, Lawrence is in the Royal Navy and his ship takes a French cargo ship carrying a very rare dragon egg. The dragon egg hatches and the dragon claims Lawrence as his own. So Lawrence and Temeraire over the course of the series develop this really close bond. It's basically like having a giant, dangerous, talking dog as a pet or as a horse, because horses are kind of pets but kind of not. And Lawrence and Temeraire just get along splendidly, and you see a lot of the politics through both of their eyes. It's not a multiple point of view book. You see things from Lawrence's perspective and you see things from Temeraire's perspective, but without going into the first person. I really enjoyed that, because then you learn what Temeraire thinks as a dragon and what Lawrence thinks as somebody who used to be in the Navy but is now in the Aerial Corps. I also loved that she talks about the modern issues of the time, such as abolition, which was a huge one, and colonialism or imperialism, which is also a very important thing at the time, and also Australia. They end up there at one point, which is a penal colony at the time. This book is written in a very old style, or at least that's the way it felt, which was perfect since it is set in the early 1800s. It was written in that same style. It took maybe a couple pages to remember that she wrote in that style, because I haven't read the books in a long time. But once I got into it and remembered that, it was actually surprisingly easy to understand. It's not Jane Eyre or Shakespeare. It has a modern feeling. Well, you understand it like you understand modern English, but it has a very old feel. I'm not entirely sure how to explain it other than that, so read the book. The next one is What Lies Between Us by Naomi Munaweera. I read this one for Joss over at Scribbles Reads book club on Goodreads. This follows a Sri Lankan girl who, through a series of rather upsetting events, ends up emigrating to the States with her mother. You see her as she tries to figure out what motherhood is later on. It's a huge theme in the book. And as she tries to figure out just exactly what life is, basically, and trying to figure out the difference between the cultures of Sri Lanka and the United States, it's very interesting. I think it did a really good job of exploring motherhood. I loved the theme of water throughout the book. I'm obsessed with water anyway, so this book was fascinating for that. The descriptions were beautiful. It was heartbreaking and emotional, and really did a wonderful job of exploring Sri Lanka's culture and what that meant when the girl moved to the States and how it changed. The last one is The Shadows of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is the first book in a trilogy, I believe, called the Licanius trilogy. I think I pronounced that right. Basically, it's a high fantasy, and there are these younger teenagers, like 16, 17 again, and there's a great evil rising up in the north that has been kept behind a wall for centuries. All of a sudden, this wall begins crumbling, and so these various kids play really important parts, obviously, in the politics of this new world, and they have to figure out how to prevent the great evil from completely breaking down the wall and taking over their world. This book was really good. I love the way it's written. It's actually surprisingly big text, and so it went pretty quickly despite the fact that it's almost 700 pages. The first 300 or so pages were really straightforward, really simple, easy to understand, and then for about 100 pages in the middle, there's time travel, and the characters are places that you don't understand or know what in the world is happening. And so for about 100 pages in the middle, I kind of read the book going, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but sure, okay. And then once it got past that, I suspect, since it was not answered in this book, that those 100 pages and the events that happened in there will be significant in the rest of the series. I'm reading the second one now, so I'm hoping that it'll come out in the second one, but we'll see. Either way, this was a really good book. It has time travel, it has magic, obviously it's a fantasy. I love the characters. I think they're really interesting, and they've got different personalities and different challenges for each of them. They're very diverse in where they work or their walks of life. None of them have the same backstory, and the politics are fantastic as well. Those are the 5 books for this mini review video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a big thumbs up down below. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button down below. As always, I will leave my Goodreads link down below, along with my best books of 2017 and Joss's channel over at Scribbles Reads if you want to check her out. That is all I have though, so I will see you soon in another video. Bye!